We return once more, as always, to reading one story per day from Pu Songling's Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, until I get bored or forget. Today, we have story number 6, The Painted Wall. Meng Longtan, a gentleman of Jiangxi province, was staying in Peking with his friend, the provincial graduate Zhu. One day, they went to visit a monastery together. Not a particularly spacious establishment, with a modest hall of worship and a number of cells for Zen meditation. There was a single elderly monk in residence who, seeing the visitors arrive, smartened himself up, went out to greet them, and took them on a tour of the precincts. In the main hall stood a statue of the Zen master Baoji, and there were superb murals on the 2 flanking walls, representations of men and animals that seemed to breathe with life. On the eastern wall was a painting of Apsaras scattering flowers, beautiful fairy-like beings, among whom Zhu noticed one maiden with unbound hair, a flower in her hand, and a magically smiling face. Her lips seemed to move, and the light in her eyes rippled like water. Zhu stared at this maiden like a man transfixed, and was soon utterly transported by the vision. He was wafted up bodily up to the wall and into the mural itself. He felt himself pillowed on clouds, and saw stretching before him a grand panorama of palaces and pavilions, a veritable fairy realm. He could see an aged abbot preaching the Dharma from a pulpit, surrounded by a throng of robed monks. Zhu was mingling with the crowd when presently he felt someone secretly tugging at his sleeve, turned to look, and saw the maiden with the unbound hair walking smilingly away from him. He followed her down curving balustraded pathways to the doorway of a small pavilion, where he hesitated. The maiden looked back and beckoned him on with the flower that she still held in her hand. So he followed her into the pavilion, where they found themselves alone, and where with no delay he embraced her and, finding her to be far from unreceptive, proceeded to make love to her. Afterwards she left him and went away, closing the door behind her and bidding him not to make the slightest sound. That same night she returned, and so their liaison continued for a further 2 days. Her female companions perceived soon enough that there was something afoot, and discovered Zhu in his hiding place. "Look at you," they teased the girl. "You've most probably got a baby on the way by now, and still you wear your hair like a little girl." They brought out hairpins and pendants, and helped her put up her hair like a grown woman, while all along she maintained a coy silence. "Come, sisters, let's go," cried one of them. "We're spoiling their fun." And off they went, giggling among themselves. Zhu gazed at her once more. With hair now piled high in a black cloud-like chignon and phoenix ornaments hanging down from it, she seemed even more adorably beautiful than before. They were alone again, and soon fell to further sports of love, his senses suffused with the heady perfume that emanated from her body, a scent of orchid mingled with musk. Their raptures were, however, rudely interrupted by the clomping of boots, the clanking of chains, and a confused and raucous shouting outside. The fairy girl leaped up, and she and Zhu hurried to the door. Peeping through, they saw a guard standing there in full armor, with a face black as pitch, carrying chains and cudgels, and surrounded by a throng of maidens. "Are you all present?" he barked. "All present," came the reply. "Are you quite sure one of you is not harboring a man from the world below in here?" cried the guard. "If so, bring him out this instant. Don't go causing trouble for yourselves." "There's no one here," they all protested. The guard cast a piercing gaze around him, implying that he was about to search the place. Zhu's fairy went ashen pale. "Hurry," she whispered, turning breathlessly to her lover and trembling with fear. "Hide under the bed." She herself opened a little side door in the wall, through which she escaped, while Zhu took refuge beneath the bed, hardly daring to breathe. The heavy boots came marching into the room, then left again, and as they stomped away into the distance, he heaved a sigh of relief. But he could still hear a great deal of coming and going and talking outside the door, and remained in a state of unbearable suspense, his eyes burning and his ears buzzing like crickets. He resigned himself to waiting quietly for his lady friend to return, barely remembering any more who he himself was or where he had come from in the first place. Meanwhile, his earthly friend Meng Longtan, who had been standing in the main hall of the monastery, suddenly noticed that Zhu was no longer by his side, and asked the monk guide where he had gone. The monk gave a wry smile. "He's listening to the sermon." "Where?" "Not far from here." Then after a little while, the monk tapped on the wall with his fingers. "What has kept you so long, sir?" he called out. At that very instant, the outline of Zhu became visible on the painted wall, standing there, his ears inclined as if he was listening to something. "Your friend has been waiting for you all this time," the monk called again. All of a sudden, Zhu drifted effortlessly down the wall and stood there before them, dazed and deeply abstracted, like a lifeless block of wood, his legs swaying unsteadily from side to side, his eyes staring in front of him. Meng Longtan was absolutely flabbergasted and inquired, as nonchalantly as possible, what had happened to him. Zhu told him the whole story, concluding, "So there I was waiting quietly under the bed when I heard a tapping noise like thunder, so I hurried out of the room to see what was going on." They all looked up at the maiden in the painting, the Apsara with the unbound hair. Sure enough, her hair was no longer hanging down, but had been dressed in fine coils on her head. Zhu was utterly amazed. He bowed respectfully to the old monk and begged him for some sort of explanation. The monk chuckled. "The source of illusion lies within man himself. Who am I to explain these things?" Zhu seemed altogether downcast by his experience, while Meng was simply out of his depth, and heaved a sigh of incomprehension. The two men took their leave, walked down the monastery steps, and went on their way.